My name is Jed Walker, and at 67 years old, I never thought the most painful words I would ever hear would come from my own daughter. A week before her birthday, she looked me straight in the eyes and said the words that shattered my heart. The greatest gift would be if you just died. 25 years of sacrifice, love, and dedication reduced to that single, cruel sentence. I made a decision that day that would change both our lives forever. If you are watching this and have ever been taken for granted by someone you love, please hit that like button and subscribe. Tell me where you are watching from in the comments. Trust me, you will want to hear what happened next. I became a single father when my wife Diana passed away from aggressive breast cancer. Amanda was just 9 years old at the time. I still remember the confusion in her big brown eyes at the funeral, tugging on my sleeve asking when Mommy would wake up. Those early years were the hardest of my life. I had to be both mother and father while dealing with my own grief. I worked at the Franklin power plant back then, a good union job that paid the bills but required long hours. After Diana died, I started taking double shifts whenever possible. My supervisor, Tom, understood my situation and helped arrange my schedule so I could drop Amanda off at school most mornings. My elderly neighbor, Mrs. Patterson, would watch her until I got home, sometimes well after dinner time. "You sure you can handle another 12-hour shift, Jed?" Tom would ask, concern written all over his face. "I have to," was always my simple reply. The extra money meant Amanda could continue her piano lessons, something Diana had started her on. Those lessons weren't cheap, but the joy on Amanda's face when she played was worth every penny of overtime. There were many career advancement opportunities I turned down over the years. The plant offered me a management position when Amanda was 12, but it would have required relocating to their facility in Arizona. Amanda had finally started to smile again, had made friends at school, and was thriving in her activities. I couldn't uproot her, not after everything she had already lost. "You're making a mistake, Walker," my boss said when I declined. "That position comes with a 30% salary bump. My daughter needs stability more than I need money," I told him. He never brought it up again. We created our own little traditions to keep Diana's memory alive while building something new, just the two of us. Every Saturday morning, I would make pancakes in funny shapes. Amanda would giggle when they came out looking like blobs instead of elephants or dinosaurs. As she got older, she started joining me at the stove, and by the time she was 14, her pancakes looked far better than mine ever did. Every summer, we would take a fishing trip to Lake Champlain. Diana and I had gone there for our honeymoon, and I wanted Amanda to know that special place. We would rent a small cabin for a week, fish during the days, and at night, I would tell Amanda stories about her mother under the stars. Those quiet moments, the lapping of the lake against our small boat, the peaceful silence between us as we waited for a bite on our lines, those were the times I felt most connected to my daughter. Amanda was a brilliant student. She inherited her mother's sharp mind and determination. When she brought home straight A's, I would paste her report card on the refrigerator and take her for ice cream, no matter how tired I was from my shift. When she struggled with trigonometry in junior year, I bought textbooks and studied after she went to bed so I could help her, even though math had never been my strong suit. "Dad, you don't have to do this," she said one night, finding me half asleep over her textbook. "I want to," I told her. "Your success is my success." When Amanda got accepted to Northwestern University with a partial scholarship, I could not have been prouder. The financial aid didn't cover everything, though. I had been saving since Diana died, putting away a little from each paycheck into Amanda's college fund, but it still wasn't enough. So I dipped into my retirement savings. My coworkers thought I was crazy. "You'll be working until you're 80, Jed," my friend Larry warned. "If that's what it takes," I responded. I had promised Diana before she died that our daughter would have every opportunity in life. A college education was non-negotiable. Those college years were tough financially, but Amanda called me every Sunday without fail. She would tell me about her classes, her friends, and her dreams of working in marketing for a big firm someday. She seemed grateful for everything, always ending our calls with, "I love you, Dad. I couldn't have done any of this without you." When she graduated with honors, I sat in that audience bursting with pride. She had accomplished what neither Diana nor I had been able to do. She was the first college graduate in our family. After the ceremony, she hugged me tightly and whispered, "This is for Mom, too." I had dreams for Amanda's future, of course. I hoped she would find someone who cherished her as much as I had cherished Diana. I hoped she would build a career that fulfilled her. Most of all, I hoped she knew how much she was loved, not just by me, but by the mother who had been taken from her too soon. I was quietly proud of what we had overcome together, the team of two that had weathered the storm of loss and emerged stronger. Little did I know that the real storm was yet to come. After graduation, Amanda landed a job at a marketing firm in Portland. I helped her move into her first apartment, a small but nice place in a decent neighborhood. She seemed excited about this new chapter in her life, and I was happy for her, even though her moving so far away left an empty space in my daily routine. I had gotten used to our regular calls during her college years, and I expected that to continue. For the first few months, it did. She would call me several times a week, telling me about her new job, her co-workers, and the city. But gradually, those calls became less frequent. What had been daily conversations during college became weekly, then bi-weekly. I told myself this was normal. She was a young adult establishing her independence. I didn't want to be the clingy father who couldn't let go. About 6 months after her move to Portland, Amanda mentioned she had met someone. His name was Jackson Thornton, and he worked in finance. From the way she talked about him, I could tell she was smitten. I was happy for her, of course, but something in her description of him gave me pause. "He took me to this amazing restaurant last night, Dad. The kind of place where dinner costs more than my weekly grocery budget," she gushed. "And he didn't even look at the prices on the menu." It was a small comment, but it stuck with me. Diana and I had always taught Amanda the value of money and the importance of living within your means. This flashy display of wealth seemed to impress her in a way that surprised me. The first time I met Jackson was during a video call. He was handsome in that polished way that sometimes comes with privilege, with perfectly styled hair and the kind of smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. He was polite enough, asking me questions about myself, but I noticed how he subtly steered the conversation back to his own accomplishments, whenever possible. "It's nice to finally meet Amanda's father," he said. "She tells me you work at a power plant." "Yes, for almost 30 years now," I replied proudly. "Interesting," he said, in a tone that suggested it was anything but. "My father runs his own investment firm. I followed in his footsteps after Harvard Business School." I didn't miss the implication, nor the way Amanda glanced at him with admiration. It was the first red flag, but I ignored it. What mattered was that Amanda was happy, wasn't it? As months passed, I noticed subtle changes in my daughter. Her language shifted, peppered with terms like networking opportunity and social capital. She began to talk about designer brands and expensive vacations as if they were necessities rather than luxuries. When I mentioned my annual fishing trip to Lake Champlain, hoping she might join me like in the old days, she laughed. "Dad, nobody goes fishing for vacation anymore. Jackson is taking me to the Maldives next month." That was the first time I felt the distance between us was more than just geographical. Our first major disagreement came when Amanda called to tell me she was leaving her marketing job. "But you loved that position," I said, confused. "You were just telling me about the campaign you were leading." "It's not prestigious enough," she replied. "Jackson thinks I should be working somewhere with more influence. His father knows someone at this luxury brand consultancy." "Is that what you want?" I asked carefully. "Of course it is," she snapped. "Why wouldn't I want to advance my career? I just want to make sure you're making choices for yourself, not because someone else thinks you should." The silence that followed was charged with tension. "I'm not a child anymore, Dad," she finally said. "I don't need you questioning my decisions." After that conversation, our communication became even more sporadic. When we did talk, I sensed a new distance in her voice, a defensiveness that hadn't been there before. Then the financial requests began. At first they were small and reasonable. She needed help with an unexpected car repair. Her apartment had raised the rent unexpectedly. I never hesitated to help, sending money the same day she asked. But over time, The requests grew larger and more frequent. A designer work wardrobe because appearance is everything in my new industry. An exclusive gym membership because all the important networking happens there. Each time I transferred money to her account, her gratitude seemed to diminish. What had once been heartfelt thanks became cursory acknowledgments, as if my financial support was an expected service rather than an act of love. The way Amanda spoke to me began to change as well. Her tone became dismissive, sometimes even condescending. She would sigh audibly when I talked about my work or my friends at the plant. Once, when I mentioned a promotion I'd received, she responded with, "That's nice, Dad," in the same tone one might use to address a child showing off a crayon drawing. I noticed her social media posts showcasing an increasingly lavish lifestyle. Designer clothes, expensive restaurants, weekends at exclusive resorts. When I asked how she could afford all this on her new salary, even with my occasional help, she became defensive. "Jackson says we need to live the part to be taken seriously in our circles," she explained. "It's an investment in our future." That Thanksgiving, Amanda invited me to Portland. I was excited to spend time with her and get to know Jackson better. I brought homemade pumpkin pie, using Diana's recipe, and a photo album I had put together of Amanda's childhood, thinking she might enjoy sharing these memories with Jackson. The apartment they now shared was in an upscale building with a doorman and a view of the city. Everything inside looked like it belonged in a magazine, beautiful but somehow untouched, as if no one actually lived there. During dinner, which Jackson had catered rather than cooked, the conversation repeatedly turned to money and status. Jackson spoke at length about his family's vacation home in Aspen, his father's connections in the business world, and the exclusive club he belonged to. "Where did you go to college again, Mr. Walker?" he asked, swirling an expensive whiskey in his glass. "I didn't," I replied honestly. "I started at the plant right out of high school." Jackson exchanged a look with Amanda that made my stomach tighten. "Well, you've done remarkably well for yourself without higher education. That's quite unusual these days." The condescension in his voice was unmistakable. What hurt more than his words was that Amanda didn't defend me. Instead, she quickly changed the subject, as if my working-class background was something embarrassing that needed to be glossed over. When I tried to share the photo album later that evening, Amanda flipped through it quickly, barely glancing at the pictures. "These are so old, Dad," she said, closing the book after just a few pages. "Jackson, you don't need to see all these. I was such an awkward kid." The homemade pie was left largely untouched in favor of an expensive tiramisu from a local bakery. As I flew home the next day, I felt a deep conflict within me. Part of me wanted to speak up, to tell Amanda how her behavior and this relationship were changing her in ways that concerned me. But another part feared that pushing too hard would only drive her further away. I had lost my wife. I couldn't bear the thought of losing my daughter, too. So I said nothing, hoping this phase would pass. It was a decision I would come to regret. 8 months after that uncomfortable Thanksgiving, Amanda called with news, her voice bubbling with excitement. She announced that she and Jackson had found a house they wanted to buy. "It's absolutely perfect, Dad," she gushed. 4 bedrooms, 3 bathrooms, a gourmet kitchen, and the most amazing backyard for entertaining. We can finally host proper dinner parties. "That sounds lovely," I said, genuinely happy to hear such joy in her voice. "What's the price range for something like that in Portland?" There was a brief pause. $750,000. I nearly choked. "That's quite a price tag for a first home. It's actually below market for the neighborhood," she said defensively. "Jackson says real estate is the best investment we can make right now." I asked the obvious question. "Do you two have enough saved for a down payment on something that expensive?" This led to the real purpose of her call. Amanda explained that while Jackson made a good salary and had some family money, they were still short on the down payment. Banks wanted at least 20% down for the best mortgage rates, which meant they needed $150,000. "We've saved about $50,000, Amanda said, then added with a carefully rehearsed casualness. "So we were hoping you might be able to help with the rest." $200,000. The sum hung in the air between us. Through the phone line. It was more than half of my retirement savings. "That's a lot of money, Amanda," I said cautiously. What followed was a masterclass in emotional manipulation. Amanda reminded me of how hard she had worked, how she had graduated with honors, how responsible she had always been. She mentioned Diana, saying, "Mom would have wanted me to have the security of owning my own home." She talked about future grandchildren having a nice yard to play in. When I still hesitated, her tone changed. "I thought you'd be happy to help me secure my future. I guess I was wrong about how much you care." Those words stung. Of course I cared. I had devoted my entire life to her well-being. And wasn't this what parents did? Help their children get established in life. Diana would have wanted Amanda to have a nice home. After a long conversation, I reluctantly agreed to provide the money, with the understanding that this would be in lieu of any future inheritance. "You'll get the money now, when you need it, rather than after I'm gone," I explained. Amanda readily agreed. "That makes perfect sense, Dad. Thank you so much. You have no idea how much this means to us." Within a week, Amanda had emailed over the paperwork. I consulted briefly with my bank's financial advisor, who cautioned me about gifting such a large sum without legal protection. But I trusted my daughter. We set up the transfer to an escrow account, with the funds to be released once all the closing paperwork was signed. The first time I visited the house, after they had moved in, I felt a mixture of pride and unease. It was indeed beautiful, situated in an exclusive neighborhood with manicured lawns and luxury cars in every driveway. Amanda gave me a tour, pointing out the expensive fixtures and custom cabinetry. Jackson spent most of the tour on his phone, barely acknowledging my presence. What troubled me was the evidence of their lifestyle that was now impossible to ignore. Brand new furniture that must have cost thousands. The latest electronics in every room. A wine collection that even I, with my limited knowledge, could tell was extremely expensive. Amanda's closet was filled with clothes still bearing price tags from high-end designers. "How are you affording all this?" I asked her quietly when Jackson was out of earshot. "The mortgage on this place must be substantial." "We're doing fine," she said dismissively. "Jackson got a bonus, and we've made some good investments. But something didn't add up. Even with a good salary and family support, their spending seemed wildly beyond their means. I worried they were accumulating dangerous levels of debt, but whenever I tried to broach the subject of financial responsibility, Amanda shut down the conversation. "We're adults, Dad. We know what we're doing." I noticed other troubling signs during that visit. The way Jackson would subtly control situations, from deciding where we would go for dinner without consulting either of us, to speaking over Amanda when she was trying to tell a story. The way she would look to him for approval before expressing an opinion. The way she seemed tense when he was in the room, relaxing only when he left. One morning, I overheard them discussing finances in the kitchen. I hadn't meant to eavesdrop, but their voices carried through the guest room wall. "We need to get the rest of the money from him," Jackson was saying, "for the kitchen renovation." "I can't ask him for more right now," Amanda replied. "He just gave us the down payment. That was months ago, and it's not like he needs it. He lives in that same dumpy house he's had forever. What's he saving for?" Their voices dropped, and I couldn't hear Amanda's response. But the exchange left me cold. I had never mentioned to Jackson where I lived or my financial situation. The calculation in his voice was unmistakable. Later that week, I attempted to have a serious conversation with Amanda about financial boundaries. We were alone, Jackson having gone to what he called an exclusive gentleman's gathering at his club. "I'm happy to help you when you truly need it," I told her gently. "But I need you to understand that my resources aren't unlimited. I'm nearing retirement age." Amanda's face hardened in a way I had never seen before. "You sound so selfish right now. After everything you've said about always being there for me, it's not selfish to plan for my own future," I tried to explain. "Your mother would have wanted that too." "Don't bring Mom into this," she snapped. "She would have done anything for me without all these conditions and guilt trips." The conversation devolved from there, with Amanda accusing me of loving money more than her, of being controlling, of not supporting her dreams. It was as if I was talking to a stranger wearing my daughter's face. We ended the evening in strained silence, and I flew home the next day with a heavy heart. A month later, I received another call from Amanda. This time she was asking for $30,000 for landscaping the backyard. When I expressed reluctance, she became immediately combative. "This is exactly why we need to secure our inheritance now," she said. "You're becoming unreliable." The word inheritance struck me. It was such a cold, calculating term for what had always been, in my mind, a father's support of his child. Not an entitlement, but a gift given from love. That evening, I called my old friend Larry, who had retired from the plant a few years earlier. During our conversation, I mentioned my concerns about Amanda and Jackson's financial habits. "Sounds like they're counting your money before you're even gone, Jed," Larry said bluntly. "My brother went through something similar with his kids, gave them everything they wanted until they started seeing him as nothing but an ATM machine." "Amanda's not like that," I said automatically. But even as the words left my mouth, I wasn't sure I believed them anymore. The final straw came during a phone call I wasn't meant to hear. I had called Amanda to discuss visiting again, and she had answered, apparently not realizing the call had connected. I could hear her and Jackson talking in what seemed to be a continuation of an ongoing conversation. "After we secure the rest of Dad's money, we can finally do the kitchen renovation properly," Amanda was saying. "No more waiting." "How much do you think is left in his retirement account?" Jackson asked. "At least a couple $100,000. Maybe more. It's not like he has anything else to spend it on. This is our inheritance anyway. We're just getting it a little early." Their laughter after that statement cut through me like a knife. I hung up without letting them know I had heard. But that conversation played on repeat in my mind for days afterward. The daughter I had raised would never have spoken about me that way. The Amanda I knew would never have reduced our relationship to a financial transaction. Something had to change. I just didn't know what, until the incident that would alter everything between us. I decided to surprise Amanda for her upcoming birthday. We hadn't spoken much since I overheard that phone conversation, and I wanted to believe there was an explanation, that I had misunderstood or taken things out of context. Perhaps seeing her in person, away from Jackson's influence, would help us reconnect. I didn't tell her I was coming. Instead, I booked a flight to Portland and took a taxi from the airport to her house, planning to take her out for a special lunch. It was a Tuesday, and I knew Jackson would be at work, giving us time alone together. When I arrived, I was surprised to see both their cars in the driveway. Using the key Amanda had given me during my last visit, I let myself in, calling out as I entered, "Amanda? It's Dad. I thought I'd surprise you for your birthday." There was no answer, but I could hear voices coming from the kitchen at the back of the house. As I approached, I recognized Amanda and Jackson in what sounded like an excited conversation. Not wanting to startle them, I slowed my steps, but before I could announce myself again, I heard my name. "Old man Jed has no idea," Jackson was saying, laughing. "The house was just the beginning. Once we renovate, the property value will increase by at least 20%. He thinks we actually needed his help with the down payment," Amanda replied, her voice carrying a tone I had never heard before, smug and dismissive, as if Jackson's trust fund couldn't have covered it. I froze in the hallway, my heart pounding in my ears. "Your dad is so predictable," Jackson continued. "All you have to do is mention your mother or make him feel guilty about being a good father, and he forks over whatever you ask for." "The renovation is going to be amazing once we secure the funds," Amanda said enthusiastically. "Italian marble countertops, Viking appliances, that custom wine cellar you wanted." "How much more do you think you can get from him?" Jackson asked. "As much as we need," Amanda replied confidently. "He's never said no to me." I must have made a noise then, because they both fell silent. I stepped into the kitchen doorway, and the look on Amanda's face when she saw me standing there would stay with me forever. Not shame or remorse, but annoyance at being caught. "Dad," she said flatly, "you should have called first." "Clearly," I replied, my voice somehow steady despite the earthquake happening inside me. "I wanted to surprise you for your birthday." "Well, surprise," Jackson said with a smirk, lifting his coffee mug and a mock toast. I looked directly at Amanda, hoping to see some sign of the daughter I had raised, the little girl who had once looked at me with love and respect. "Were you really just using me for money? Was the house down payment a lie?" She had the decency to look uncomfortable, but her response lacked any real contrition. "You're overreacting. It's not like that. We did need help with the house, but you didn't," I said, the pieces falling into place. "Jackson's trust fund could have covered it. You just said so yourself." "Why does it matter?" she asked defensively. "You have the money, and we're family. What's yours is eventually going to be mine anyway." Her words hit me like physical blows. "Is that all I am to you now? A bank account?" The argument escalated from there. Amanda became increasingly defensive, then aggressive. She accused me of spying on them, of being controlling, of never really supporting her choices. Jackson stood by with that same smirk, occasionally interjecting a comment that only inflamed the situation. "You've never liked Jackson," Amanda shouted. "You've been judgmental from the beginning because he comes from money and you don't." "This isn't about money," I tried to explain. "It's about honesty and respect." "Respect?" she scoffed. "You want respect for working a blue-collar job your whole life and living in the same run-down house? For never trying to be anything more than ordinary?" Each word she spoke seemed designed to wound, to diminish the life I had built and the sacrifices I had made, many of them for her. Jackson stood behind her, his hand on her shoulder in a gesture that seemed less supportive and more possessive. "I think you should leave," he said to me, as if he had the authority to dismiss me from my daughter's presence. I looked at Amanda, waiting for her to contradict him, to say that this was between us, that he had no right to intervene. Instead, she nodded in agreement. "You should go, Dad. We can talk about this another time, when you're being more reasonable." "Reasonable?" I echoed, disbelieving. "You lied to me to get money for a house you didn't need help buying. You've been planning to ask for more based on false pretenses, and I'm the unreasonable one?" Something in Amanda's expression changed then, her features hardening into a mask of cold disdain. "You know what would make this all easier?" she said, her voice dropping to a dangerous softness. "The greatest gift would be if you just died. Then we wouldn't have to keep coming up with reasons to get what's going to be ours anyway." The kitchen fell silent. Even Jackson looked momentarily shocked at the cruelty of her words. I stood there, unable to speak, feeling as though the floor had disappeared from beneath my feet. In all my 67 years, I had never felt pain like this, not even when Diana died. This was a different kind of death, the death of everything I thought I knew about my daughter and our relationship. I searched Amanda's face for any sign that she didn't mean it, that it was just anger speaking, that she was as horrified by her words as I was. But there was nothing there but cold determination and perhaps a hint of satisfaction at having rendered me speechless. Jackson's shock quickly transformed back into that familiar smirk, as if he was impressed by Amanda's brutality. I didn't shout. I didn't cry. I simply picked up my small overnight bag, which I had set down upon entering, and walked toward the door. No dramatic exit, just the quiet footsteps of a man whose world had just imploded. "Dad, wait," Amanda called after me, perhaps realizing she had gone too far. But there was nothing left to say. The drive back to the airport passed in a blur. I sat in the back of the taxi, watching the Portland streets through a veil of unshed tears, replaying Amanda's words over and over. "The greatest gift would be if you just died." My own child, wishing for my death for financial gain. In my hotel room that night, the tears finally came. I cried for the little girl who used to run into my arms when I came home from work. I cried for the teenager who had thanked me with sincere gratitude when I helped her with college applications. I cried for Diana, who would have been heartbroken to see what had become of our daughter. Most of all, I cried for myself, for the years of love and sacrifice that had somehow led to this moment of utter betrayal. I didn't sleep that night. How could I? Every time I closed my eyes, I heard Amanda's words echoing in my mind. The greatest gift would be if you just died. As the night deepened into early morning, my grief began to transform into something else. Not anger exactly, but clarity, a clear-eyed understanding of what needed to be done. I spent those quiet hours reviewing my life and my relationship with Amanda. I thought about all the times I had put her needs before my own, the dreams I had deferred, the opportunities I had passed up. I remembered Diana's words to me in the hospital during her final days. Promise me you'll take care of our girl, she had whispered. But don't forget to live your own life too, Jed. I want both of you to be happy. Had I kept that promise? I had certainly taken care of Amanda, perhaps too well. But I had neglected the second part of Diana's wish. In focusing entirely on being a good father, I had forgotten to live my own life. Now, at 67, I was facing the painful realization that my daughter saw me as nothing more than a financial resource to be drained and discarded. As dawn broke over the hotel room, I made a decision. Things would change, starting today. My first call that morning was to Frank Thompson, an attorney I had known since high school. Frank had handled Diana's will and had been gently suggesting for years that I update my own estate planning. I had always put it off, assuming there was plenty of time and that everything would naturally go to Amanda anyway. Now I realized how naive that assumption had been. I need to see you as soon as possible, I told Frank. Today, if you can fit me in. Perhaps hearing the urgency in my voice, Frank rearranged his schedule to meet me that afternoon. I flew home and drove straight to his office. It's been a while, Jed, he said, shaking my hand warmly. What's so urgent? I told him everything. The house down payment, the manipulation, the overheard conversations, and finally, Amanda's cruel words. Frank listened without interrupting, his expression growing increasingly troubled. I'm sorry, he said when I finished. No parent should ever hear something like that from their child. I need to know my options, I said. The house money. Is there any way to get it back? Frank explained that since the funds had been properly transferred and documented as a gift for the down payment, legally reclaiming them would be difficult. However, he confirmed that I was under no obligation to provide any additional money. What about the escrow account? I asked. The closing hasn't happened yet. That's different, Frank said, suddenly alert. If the funds are still in escrow and the final paperwork hasn't been signed, you may be able to cancel the transaction. We immediately contacted the escrow company. As luck would have it, due to some issues with the seller's documentation, the closing had been delayed. My funds were still sitting in the account, untouched. Frank helped me draft the necessary paperwork to withdraw from the transaction. The sellers might be upset, but legally you're within your rights, he assured me. There will be some fees and penalties, but the bulk of your money will be returned. Next, we turned to my broader financial affairs. For the next several hours, Frank helped me restructure everything. We set up a revocable trust that would protect my assets during my lifetime. We revised my will, allocating a small portion to Amanda, but directing the majority of my estate to a scholarship fund for children who had lost a parent to cancer, in Diana's memory. Are you sure about this? Frank asked as I signed the documents. These changes are significant. I've never been more certain of anything, I replied. Once the legal matters were addressed, I turned my attention to what I would say to Amanda. How do you respond to your only child telling you she wishes you were dead? No parenting book covered that situation. I spent the entire next day writing a letter. I wanted to be careful, measured, to explain my feelings without lashing out in anger. Diana would have wanted me to take the high road, even in the face of such betrayal. Dear Amanda, I began. By the time you read this, you'll know that I've withdrawn the funding for your house. I want you to understand why. I continued for several pages, pouring out my heart, describing the pain her words had caused, but also acknowledging my own role in our dysfunctional relationship. I had enabled her sense of entitlement by always giving in, always saying yes, never setting proper boundaries. That wasn't love, it was abdication of parental responsibility. I will always love the daughter I raised, I wrote toward the end. I hope that someday she finds her way back to being that person. Until then, I need to step away and give us both space to reflect and grow. After finishing the letter, I turned to creating a memory box. In it, I placed photographs of our family when Amanda was young. Happy moments at Lake Champlain, her high school graduation, the two of us at Diana's favorite spot in the park. I added Diana's jewelry box containing her wedding ring and the pearl necklace my daughter had always admired. I included handwritten recipes for Amanda's favorite childhood meals and the journals Diana had kept during her pregnancy and Amanda's early years. These weren't valuable in monetary terms, but they were our family's true legacy. The stories, The memories, the love that had bound us together. Whether Amanda would appreciate them now, I couldn't say, but I wanted her to have them. I also recorded a video message, something she could watch when she was ready. In it, I spoke about unconditional love but also about self-respect. I explained that loving someone doesn't mean allowing them to treat you as if you don't matter. I talked about the lessons I hoped she would eventually learn from this painful chapter in our lives. With these preparations complete, I began to plan for my own future. For the first time in decades, I thought about what I wanted for myself, not just what Amanda needed. I had always loved the Oregon coast, with its dramatic cliffs and crashing waves. Diana and I had honeymooned there, long before Lake Champlain, and had always talked about retiring to a small coastal town. I contacted a rental agency and secured a cottage for 3 months in Cannon Beach. It was a small place with a view of Haystack Rock, within walking distance of the town center. I arranged for a leave of absence from work, using the considerable vacation time I had accumulated over years of rarely taking days off. The final piece was delivering everything to Amanda. I couldn't face seeing her in person. Not yet. The wound was still too raw. Instead, I timed my visit to her house for when I knew both she and Jackson would be at work. I used my key one last time to let myself in. I placed the letter, the memory box, and a USB drive containing the video message on her dining room table, where she couldn't miss them. I looked around at the expensive house that my hard-earned money had helped purchase, a house built on lies and manipulation. Before leaving, I made one last stop at Diana's grave. I hadn't been there in several months, and the guilt of that neglect weighed on me as I placed fresh flowers beside her headstone. "I'm not sure if I did right by her, Di," I said quietly. "Somewhere along the way, I lost our little girl, or maybe I never really knew her at all." The cemetery remained silent, offering no absolution or guidance. But as I stood there in the gentle spring sunlight, I felt something shift within me, a burden lifting. Diana wouldn't have wanted me to spend the rest of my life in sorrow over Amanda's choices. She would have told me to live, to find joy again. With that thought providing some measure of peace, I drove to the airport and boarded a plane for Oregon, leaving behind the only life I had known for over 30 years. The cottage in Cannon Beach was exactly what I needed. Small but comfortable, with weathered cedar shingles and a covered porch facing the ocean. From my rocking chair, I could watch the endless dance of the waves against Haystack Rock, that massive sea stack rising from the shoreline like nature's own monument. My first week there, I did little but sit on that porch, lost in thought, processing everything that had happened. I ignored the buzzing of my phone as Amanda's calls and texts came in. First angry, then confused, then increasingly desperate as she realized what had happened with the house funding. I wasn't ready to talk to her yet. Perhaps I never would be. I had left my key to her house on the table alongside the letter and memory box, but I kept my phone. Some part of me needed to know she was trying to reach me, even if I wasn't ready to respond. It was a complicated emotion, a mixture of hurt, vindication, and the stubborn remnants of paternal concern. Her voicemails tracked the progression of her reaction. The first ones were furious. "How could you do this? The sellers are threatening to sue us. You had no right to pull out of the deal." Then came the manipulation, so transparent now that I could recognize it. "Dad, please, I'm sorry if I upset you. You know I didn't mean what I said. We were just having a bad day. Call me back, please. We can fix this." Finally, when those approaches failed to elicit a response, she tried desperation. "Dad, I don't know where you are, or if you're okay. I'm worried. Please just let me know you're safe. We can deal with the house and everything else later." I saved those messages but didn't reply. I needed this time and space to figure out who Jed Walker was outside of being Amanda's father. It was on my 10th day in Cannon Beach that I met Gloria Peterson. She was my next-door neighbor, a silver-haired woman in her 70s with bright eyes and a no-nonsense manner. I was struggling to untangle my fishing gear on the porch when she walked over. "You're making a mess of that," she observed, hands on her hips. "May I?" Without waiting for a response, she took the tangled mass from my hands and began working on it with nimble fingers. Within minutes, She had sorted out what had seemed to me an impossible knot. "Thank you," I said, genuinely impressed. "Where did you learn to do that?" "My husband was a commercial fisherman for 40 years, she replied. "I've untangled more fishing line than most people have seen in their lifetime. I'm Gloria, by the way." "Jed," I responded, shaking her offered hand. "Jed Walker." "Well, Jed Walker, you look like a man who could use a decent meal and maybe some conversation that isn't with yourself. I'm making clam chowder tonight. 6 o'clock. Don't be late." Her directness was refreshing after months of navigating Amanda and Jackson's subtle manipulations and hidden agendas. I found myself accepting her invitation. Gloria's cottage was similar to mine, but filled with a lifetime of collected treasures. Books lined every wall, shells and sea glass occupied every surface, and photographs of what I assumed was her family covered an entire hallway. Over bowls of the best clam chowder I had ever tasted, Gloria shared her story. She had been a therapist before retiring, specializing in family trauma and reconciliation. Her husband had passed 5 years earlier, and she had moved permanently to what had once been their vacation home. "And what brings you to Cannon Beach, Jed?" she asked, fixing me with a penetrating gaze that suggested she saw more than most people. Perhaps it was her background as a therapist, or simply the kindness in her eyes, but I found myself telling her everything. The words poured out of me, the whole painful story from Diana's death, through Amanda's cruel statement and my subsequent actions. Gloria listened without interruption, nodding occasionally, her expression compassionate but not pitying. "You've been through the ringer," she said when I finally fell silent. "But you did the right thing, setting boundaries. It's never too late for that." "I just keep wondering where I went wrong," I admitted. "How did my sweet little girl turn into someone who could say such a terrible thing?" "Parenting isn't a perfect science," Gloria replied. "We do our best, but children make their own choices. Your daughter is an adult now. Her character is her responsibility, not yours." It was a simple statement, but it hit me with the force of revelation. All these years, I had carried the weight of being both mother and father to Amanda, feeling solely responsible for her happiness and success. The idea that I could love her fully, while still recognizing her agency and responsibility for her own choices, was liberating. Over the following weeks, Gloria became my guide to both Cannon Beach and the process of rediscovering myself. She introduced me to a group of retirees who met for coffee every morning at the local bakery. Among them were former teachers, doctors, engineers, and artists, all with stories to share and perspectives that expanded my world. I joined the community center and found myself volunteering for their mentorship program, working with local teenagers whose parents were absent due to death, divorce, or other circumstances. Sharing my experiences as a single father helped these kids in ways I hadn't anticipated, and their resilience inspired me. During my 3rd week in Cannon Beach, I discovered the local woodworking shop. The owner, Ted, offered classes in his studio behind the store. On a whim, I signed up for a beginner's course in wood carving. My hands, strong from years of work at the plant, but unaccustomed to such delicate tasks, struggled at first. But there was something deeply satisfying about transforming a block of cedar into a recognizable shape. "You've got a natural feel for the wood," Ted commented as I worked on a small whale figure. "Some folks fight against the grain, try to force it, but you're letting the wood tell you what it wants to be." I began spending hours in the workshop, the rhythmic motion of carving quieting my troubled mind. I made small gifts for Gloria and my new friends in the coffee group. As my skills improved, I started creating more ambitious pieces: dolphins, seabirds, and finally, a detailed replica of haystack rock that Ted proudly displayed in his shop window. Through all of this, Amanda continued trying to reach me. The tone of her messages shifted again, becoming reflective and, perhaps, genuinely remorseful. "Dad, I found the memory box and watched your video. I don't know what to say except I'm sorry. I don't recognize the person I've become either. Please call me. I need to talk to you." Gloria, who had become something of a confidant, advised me not to rush into reconnecting. "Healing takes time," she said. "For both of you. She needs to understand the consequences of her actions. and you need to figure out what kind of relationship you're willing to have moving forward. 4 months into my stay, which I had extended indefinitely, I received a call from Larry back home. "Thought you might want to know," he said. "Your daughter's been asking around about you. Came to the plant looking for information on where you'd gone." "What did you tell her?" I asked. "Just that you'd taken some time off. Didn't mention Oregon. Figured if you wanted her to know where you were, you'd tell her yourself." "Thanks, Larry." She looked rough, Jed. That fancy boyfriend wasn't with her. She said something about them splitting up. That information stirred complicated feelings. I didn't wish unhappiness on Amanda, despite everything. But perhaps the end of her relationship with Jackson was a necessary step in her finding her way back to herself. Around this same time, I received news that the power plant was offering early retirement packages. After consulting with Gloria and Frank, I decided to accept. My rental cottage had begun to feel like home, and Cannon Beach offered the fresh start I hadn't known I needed. With my retirement funds intact thanks to the canceled house transaction, and a modest pension from the plant, I could afford to stay. I found myself wondering what Diana would think of all this. Would she approve of my decision to step back from Amanda's life? Would she understand the pain that had driven me to such drastic action? One evening, sitting on my porch watching the sunset paint the sky in shades of orange and pink, I felt a sense of peace settle over me. Diana had always believed in forgiveness, but she had also believed in standing up for yourself. She would have been hurt by Amanda's behavior, but she would have wanted healing for both of us, in whatever form that might take. 6 months after I had left that letter on Amanda's dining room table, I finally felt ready to respond to her messages, not to reestablish the old patterns, but to open the door to something new, something healthier for both of us. I picked up my phone and composed a simple text. "I'm okay. I needed time. I'm in Cannon Beach, Oregon. When you're ready for an honest conversation, let me know." 3 days after I sent that text, there was a knock on my cottage door. I opened it to find Amanda standing there, her appearance so changed that for a moment I wasn't sure it was her. Gone were the designer clothes and perfectly styled hair. She wore simple jeans and a sweater, her hair pulled back in a ponytail, her face free of makeup and marked with the traces of recent tears. "Dad," she said, her voice breaking on that single syllable. I stood frozen, unprepared for this moment despite the months of reflection and healing. Part of me wanted to pull her into a hug immediately, to comfort her as I had when she was small. Another part remembered the cruel words, the manipulation, the betrayal, and held back. "How did you find me?" I asked, my voice steadier than I felt. "Your friend Larry. He wouldn't tell me at first, but I kept coming back to the plant. I think he finally felt sorry for me." She paused, shifting uncomfortably on the porch. "Can I come in?" I stepped aside, allowing her into the small cottage that had become my sanctuary. She looked around, taking in the simple furniture, the wood carvings displayed on shelves, the view of the ocean through the front windows. "It suits you," she said quietly. "This place." We sat at my small kitchen table, the awkwardness between us palpable. Amanda twisted her hands in her lap, a nervous habit she had had since childhood. "I practiced what I would say to you all the way here," she began. "I had this whole speech prepared, but now that I'm sitting here looking at you, none of it seems right." "Just tell me the truth," I said. "That's all I want." She nodded, taking a deep breath. "The truth is, I don't recognize the person I became. When I heard those words coming out of my mouth, about wishing you were dead, I was shocked, but not shocked enough to take them back immediately. That's the part that scares me the most. How did I turn into someone who could say that to their father, and not immediately fall apart with regret?" Her voice trembled, but she continued. "After you left and canceled the house funding, Jackson was furious. He wanted me to sue you. When I refused, things got ugly. He had been controlling for a long time, but I never saw how bad it was until then. We broke up a month after you disappeared. I'm sorry," I said, and meant it. No matter what Jackson had done, I knew Amanda must be hurting from the end of the relationship. She shook her head. "Don't be." It was the wake-up call I needed. Once he was gone, I started to see how much I had changed to please him, how I had adopted his values, his attitudes, even his contempt for the kind of life you led, the kind of life you provided for me. Tears began to fall down her cheeks. I watched the video you left, a dozen times at least. You talked about unconditional love and self-respect, and it made me realize I had neither for myself. I loved myself conditionally, based on status and appearances, and I had no respect for who I really was underneath all that. She reached across the table, not quite touching me, but extending her hand in a plea for connection. I started therapy, intensive therapy, trying to understand how I could have treated the person who loved me most in the world so cruelly. It hasn't been easy, facing the truth about myself. I listened, my heart both heavy and hopeful. The pain was still there, but seeing her genuine contrition, hearing the self-awareness in her words, began to soften the hardened places within me. What happened with the house? I asked. We lost it, of course. The sellers were angry, but eventually found another buyer. Jackson's trust fund apparently wasn't as substantial as he had led everyone to believe. Or maybe his parents cut him off, I don't know. He moved back to Boston. She looked down at her hands. I found a small apartment. I went back to my original marketing firm. They took me back, but at a lower position. I'm working my way up again, on my own merit this time. The conversation continued for hours. Amanda shared her journey of the past 6 months, the hard lessons, the painful realizations. She had reconnected with old friends from before Jackson, friends she had discarded when they didn't fit into the elite social circle he cultivated. She had started volunteering at a cancer support center, inspired by the memories of Diana that my box of keepsakes had awakened. I found Mom's journals, she said. I never knew she had written them. Reading her words, seeing how much she loved us both, how she fought to stay alive for us, it changed something in me. I've been trying to live with the kind of courage and grace she showed. As evening approached, I invited Amanda to stay for dinner. I prepared a simple meal, and as we ate, the conversation gradually shifted to lighter topics. She asked about my wood carving, admiring the pieces displayed around the cottage. I asked about her volunteer work at the cancer center. It wasn't until after dinner, as we sat on the porch watching the stars appear over the ocean, that Amanda broached the subject of our future. I don't expect things to go back to how they were, she said. I know I broke something precious between us. I'm not asking for your forgiveness right now, or even your trust. Those have to be earned. I just want a chance to try. I considered her words carefully. The old Jed would have rushed to reassure her, to sweep the hurt under the rug in the name of peace. But I had grown too, these past months. I had learned the value of honesty, even when it was difficult. I do forgive you, Amanda, I said finally. Not because what you did wasn't deeply hurtful, but because holding on to that pain serves neither of us. But you're right that trust is different. That will take time to rebuild. I understand, she said quietly. I want you in my life, I continued. You're my daughter, and I love you. But our relationship needs to be different going forward. More balanced, more honest, with clear boundaries and respect on both sides. She nodded, tears glistening in her eyes again. That's all I'm asking for. A chance to build something new, something better. We talked late into the night, outlining what this new relationship might look like. I was clear that I would continue living my own life here in Cannon Beach, pursuing the interests and friendships I had developed. Amanda would need to respect my independence. She, in turn, shared her commitment to continuing therapy and building a career and life based on authentic values rather than materialism and status. The next morning, I introduced Amanda to Gloria, who welcomed her with cautious warmth. Over coffee, Gloria suggested an idea. There's a family reconciliation workshop at the community center next month, she said. For parents and adult children working through difficult relationships, I was planning to facilitate some of the sessions. You two might find it helpful. Amanda looked to me, letting me make the decision. Another small but significant change. I think that would be good, I said, for both of us. Over the following weeks and months, Amanda and I began the careful work of rebuilding our relationship. She visited Cannon Beach regularly, sometimes staying in my guest room, sometimes at the small inn in town. We attended Gloria's workshop, which provided tools for healthy communication and boundary setting. We had difficult conversations about the past, but also created new memories together, exploring the coastal towns, hiking the nearby trails, even taking a woodworking class together. A year after Amanda's first visit to Cannon Beach, we embarked on a joint project inspired by our experiences. Using my woodworking skills and her marketing expertise, we created a program at the community center for families healing from betrayal and estrangement. We shared our story, the painful parts, and the healing journey, in the hope of helping others navigate similar waters. On Amanda's birthday, exactly 2 years after those cruel words that had shattered our relationship, I gave her a special gift. It wasn't money or material possessions. It was a small carved box containing a single piece of paper, on which I had written the most important lesson I had learned. Unconditional love does not mean unconditional acceptance of harmful behavior. True love sets boundaries that protect the dignity of both giver and receiver. This is the legacy I want to leave you, more valuable than any inheritance. Amanda read it with tears in her eyes, then embraced me. "I understand now, Dad," she whispered. "It took losing everything to learn what really matters." As we walked along the beach that evening, watching the sun sink toward the horizon, I felt a sense of peace that had been long in coming. The pain was not entirely gone. Perhaps it never would be. The trust was still being rebuilt, day by day. But there was hope now, and a deeper understanding between us. The relationship we were creating was more honest, more balanced, and ultimately more loving than what we had before. We had both learned that real love isn't about financial support or emotional manipulation. It's about seeing each other clearly, respecting boundaries, and choosing to remain connected even when it's difficult. I look back now on that terrible day when my daughter told me the greatest gift would be if I died, and I can see it as the painful but necessary catalyst for transformation. Sometimes the harshest words lead to the most profound growth, if we have the courage to face the truth they reveal. Have you ever had to rebuild a relationship from the ground up? I would love to hear your stories in the comments below. If this resonated with you, please hit the like button and subscribe to the channel. Your support helps me continue sharing these difficult life lessons. Thank you for listening. And remember, it's never too late to heal, to grow, and to create something beautiful from the broken pieces of our past.